Welcome to the Mennonite Heritage Village at home. Through the Safe at Home grant that we received through the province, we're bringing a series of videos to you and bringing the museum home to you. My name is Patrick Friesen, and I'm going to be your host through these videos. I'm looking forward to showing you around a little bit. This week on the show, we have Jessica Bueller telling the story of her great-grandmother, Sara Wall. David Graham stops by to sing a familiar tune, and Hali Reimer Chaplin will be giving us a mental health minute all the way from PEI. And in our segment around the museum, our senior curator, Andrea Clausen, will be talking about a special music box that will be part of our new exhibit opening up in June. Stay tuned to the end when we have some news for you about the stuff that's going on around the museum.
Hello, my name is Jessica Bueller. I was born in Germany, moved here to Canada when I was 11. I'm of descendants of Mennonites, and I always joke, well, we made it here eventually, even though it was 100 years later than the main migration. I have my BA in history from the University of Manitoba. I'm currently doing my master's in German studies. And yeah, in my free time, I teach German, and I lead worship and conduct the choir in my church. So last year, my aunt gave me the autobiography of my paternal great-grandmother, Sara Bueller, born Wall. She was such a remarkable woman, and I just wanted to share her story today. Shortly after the first Mennonites came to Canada from the Ukraine, a group of Mennonites from the same settlements decided to travel east instead. My great-grandmother's family was part of this migration, and they came to Kyrgyzstan sometimes around the 1880s. Sara was born on the 18th of February 1910 in Gnadenfeld, which was later incorporated into Leninpol, which is situated in the Talas Valley of northwestern Kyrgyzstan. She really starts her autobiography with her baptism at the age of 15 and then jumps to her wedding to Heinrich Bueller at the age of 19, which occurred on November 23, 1929. It must have been a fairy tale-like wedding because she talked about that day a lot through her life. It was filled with family members, good food, lots of music and fun. As promising as their marriage started, it didn't last very long. On January 7, 1931, Heinrich was taken to work in a labor camp, and Sara was left alone with her 4-month-old daughter, Lieschen. However, due to an illness, Heinrich was released a year later and was allowed to come back home. But at this time, the famine and the persecution of Christians hit the Soviet Union. In January 1933, her husband Heinrich was again taken due to his faith. And Sara was left alone with a 2-year-old daughter and her 6-week-old son Herbert, who's my grandfather. This time, things got a lot worse. Sara's assets were taken away and she was evicted from her home in the middle of winter. Her baby boy was very sick at that time, and she writes, war krank und schrie Tag und Nacht, sodass mich oft eine Todesmüdigkeit überfiel. Aber dennoch reichte es alles noch nicht zu. Ja, das Schiff auf dem wilden Meer wollte versinken. Es schien, als ob kein Steuermann mehr im Schifflein war. He was sick and screamed day and night, so that I was often overcome with a death-like fatigue or a deep depression. But still it was not enough. The ship on the wild sea wanted to sink. It seemed as if there was no captain in the little ship. And yet she found solace in her faith in God and found the strength to keep going. She received help from her siblings who took her and her children in for the first couple of months. In the springtime, the food became so scarce, her parents took Lieschen, and Sara had to go work as a day laborer just to survive. During this time, she had to leave her little baby at home, and to keep him safe, she would tie him up so he wouldn't hurt himself, and that is where he was left all day. It broke my heart to come home and to have to see him like that, she writes. This went on for 2 years, in which it was a daily struggle just to survive. On August 10th, 1934, a hay wagon suddenly came to their house, and the driver asked Sara if she wanted her husband back. She comments, Ich war wie stumm, wusste nicht, was ich antworten sollte. In dem Moment richtete sich mein Gatte aus dem Wagen. Die überraschende Freude war fast nicht zu ertragen. I was speechless, didn't know what to answer him. And at that moment, my husband pulled himself out of the cart. The surprising joy was almost unbearable. It turns out Heinrich had escaped from prison, and it had taken him just over 22 days to get back home on foot. The joy was great, and they celebrated his return throughout the night. But like a good Mennonite, the next morning he promptly went to the authorities, told them he had escaped from prison, and asked if he maybe could stay home. And like a miracle, to everyone's surprise, the authorities had agreed. For the following 8 years, Heinrich and Sara worked in the kolkhoz, which is the farm collective, and they slowly saved up enough money to build themselves a little house. During this time, they also had another daughter named Toni. They moved into their little house on the 12th of May in 1941. Their house dedication was on the 19th, and then almost to the day, a year later, on the 18th of May 1942, Heinrich was taken away to work in the gulags because he was a German during the Second World War in the Soviet Union. His final words to her were, "Sara, if not here, then we will meet again before God's throne." 7 months later, 5 days before Christmas, Sara was taken away to work in the labor camps as well. Her elderly mother had to take care of the children. We drove into the world with pain and bleeding hearts, is Sara's comments on hearing her children scream goodbyes after her. In September 1943, Sara received the heartbreaking news that her husband had died 3 months ago in June. A few months later, in January 1944, she received a telegram that her mother had also passed away, and the children were now in care of a sickly aunt who couldn't really provide for them. She writes, "I asked, Lord, how much deeper yet? Again and again, I have to surrender my children, myself, to the Lord." Sara prayed a lot that God would intervene and that she could get home to take care of her children. And her prayers were answered. Shortly after, she was released and was permitted to travel home. In the autumn of 1944, she was again drafted, but this time she was allowed to take her children with her. And so their journey went to the city of Kim, which is today Nurafshon in Tajikistan. Food and provisions were very scarce, and Herbert, at the age of 12, started to work in the chemical factory close by. This enabled him to earn 150 rubles per month and 600 grams of bread. To compare, in 1946, a kilogram of wheat flour would have cost between 50 to 70 rubles, so 150 was not very much. During this time, Sara became really sick. She became unresponsive and almost died, and she writes that the thought of leaving her children alone in this world gave her the determination to pull through. However, she was permanently weakened and classified as disabled type 2, which meant she could do some minor light physical labor, but nothing too strenuous. This then also reduced the wages she received, and the family became dependent on the oldest daughter, Lieschen, to work as well. In 1947, 2 years after the war had ended, Sara and her children were finally allowed to go home. But the country was still in the grips of the 1946-47 famine. My grandfather talks about being so hungry that he had to eat the grass on the wayside because there was nothing else to nourish him. After 2 weeks of living with relatives, the family was allowed to move back into their little house. They had to share it with the Karachay family, which is a Turkic ethnic group living in the area, for 3 weeks until they had their house fully back. Things slowly started to improve. The oldest two went to work in the kolkhoz, and they managed to survive the first year until harvest time gave them a meager supply of food to get through the rest of the year. Sara ends her autobiography with these words: "Today we can say, and even when the waves went high, which often hurried the ship of faith, the Helper steered it after all because Jesus the Savior was there. Today it has been 25 years since our wedding day, November 23rd, 1954. Sara never remarried. She passed away peacefully in the night from the 20th to the 21st of December 1970. She was 60 years old, and her last words were, 'Savior, take me home. I am so tired.'" I never met my great-grandmother. However, the thing that struck me from reading her autobiography was that the times she was writing in, which was 1954, she remembered the songs that were sung at every occasion decades earlier, from her baptism to when her husband returned from prison to when she came home to meet her children again. She lived in a time where a careless word about your faith or singing a simple song would be enough to have you killed. And yet, in the absence of a Bible, she found solace and strength in hymns and songs that she had memorized. And as someone who finds a lot of comfort and hope in music myself, this drew a connection for me to this woman whose incredible determination and strength helped her family survive a time period that a lot of people didn't.
The autumn leaves pass by my window, the falling leaves of red and gold. I see your lips, your smiling kisses, the sunburned hands I used to hold. Since you went away, the days grow long. Soon I'll hear old winter's song. But I miss you most of all, my darling. When autumn leaves begin to fall, the autumn leaves pass by my window, the falling leaves of red and gold. I see your lips, your smiling kisses, the sunburned hands I used to hold. Since you went away, the days grow long. Soon I'll hear old winter's song. But I miss you most of all, my darling. When autumn leaves begin to fall,
I'm here with Hali Reimer Chaplin from 12 Stones Counseling. Hali is a former resident and grew up in the Steinbach area, I do believe. And so kind of feels like connecting from home, but right now she resides in PEI. And so very excited to have Hali with us for our mental health minute. So Hali, what have you found to be something important to be able to hold on to with this whole talk about being socially distant or being physically distant? Help us with that.
I think that it's such a great question. I think that we use socially distanced, that we need to stay socially distanced from each other, when actually what we mean is we need to stay physically distanced from each other. We need to stay socially connected. And you know what? You can do that by using WhatsApp to reach out to family members or to friends. You can use Twitter or Facebook or whatever social media you have, or you know what? Just go old school and pick up the telephone and call someone. Let them know that you're okay. Ask them if they're okay, and let's just continue looking after each other.
Right on. That's very helpful, Hali. It's so good. And we look forward to getting more of these short little helpful tidbits in the weeks to come. Thanks a lot, Hali.
You're very welcome.
My name's Patrick Friesen, and I'm the development coordinator here. And I, too, am a bit new. I started back here at the end of August, and I've been getting to know this place both inside and out, getting to meet some of the people and getting to be familiar with a bunch of the artifacts that we have. On this series of videos, I want to show you a little bit of behind the scenes of how this place comes alive at different moments and different times. I want you to, well, we can't be here right yet, that you're able to get a little bit of an idea of what goes on. And when we are able to be open to the public, that you will be ready to come back.
The next artifact from Susan is a really special one, and it has to do with her service with the American military in Europe. At the time of donation, the donor told the story this way, and here I'll quote from the file again. At the end of the European campaign, Susan was working in an American military hospital in Berlin. An orderly who worked with her was a POW from Czechoslovakia. They worked well together, and he was trustworthy, so he was given the privilege of walking outdoors around the hospital. When he was outside the fence, he picked up pieces of wood from destroyed buildings and, using his carving skills, made Aunt Susan a musical jewelry box, which she cherished. Her nickname was Jan, taken from her surname, and it appears on the lid of the music box in inlaid wood. She gave us this prized possession about 30 years ago for safekeeping. We can think of no safer place for it than the Mennonite Heritage Village in Steinbach. Aunt Susan would certainly approve. And so here we have the music box with her name inlaid in the cover. It does open, and it has a musical component to it as well, which does still play. Susan returned home from overseas and married Alfred Siski in 1949, and they retired to Florida in their later years. We don't know much about Alfred, but we do know that he too had a military career. Both of them were buried in the military cemetery in Bugsnell, Florida.
Hey, thanks a lot for sticking around to the end of the video. In news around the village, the Winter Carnival is going to be happening on February 13th. Yes, we're going to be having the village grounds open to the public. There's going to be skating, sledding, snow carving, and much more. There's going to be fun for the whole family. You can get more descriptions. There's a link in the description. If you want to go down there, you can click on the link that says that takes us to the Winter Carnival, and you'll get a lot more details on the website there as to what's happening with the carnival. In addition to this video series, we've also launched a children's video series as well. And you can find a link to that channel geared specifically for kids, where they'll find stories, crafts, and contests, and tell your kids, your grandkids, your nieces, your nephews, and make sure to let them know that we've got a series of videos just for them for the next couple of weeks as well. If you like this video, click the like button, subscribe to make sure you don't miss any of the videos that are going to be coming in the following weeks. See you next week.